Hello, friends. We are joined today, right now, by Mr. Eugene Raab, who was born in the year 1930, and on June 4, he just celebrated his 90th birthday. Hello there, Mr. Raab.
Hello.
It's so great to spend some time together. We understand that you built your house in 1959 and have lived there ever since. That is beautiful.
My dad made a small model so my mom could see what it would look like. And they decided that was what they wanted. This area was originally Paris Township before it became Kentwood. My dad and there were 6 boys altogether, including my dad, and 4 girls. And my dad and his brothers came together, and first dad had someone he knew frame it, but then the boys took it from there and they built the house. He did. And there was no electricity, no running water. There was a pump in the kitchen that led down into a well, correct?
Yeah. Well, later we had, but what we had a windmill. It was called a well house. There were big tanks in there that collected cold water.
Right. And there was a pump in the kitchen. You had to pump the water.
Well, no, we didn't have one in the kitchen. There was one outside because we had a windmill.
Okay. So you had to pump the water outside. It wasn't necessarily in the kitchen.
Right.
But you didn't have refrigeration.
No.
No, there was no refrigerator. So everything had to be really fresh. But anyway, it was a very rustic life that's very, very different from the one we have today.
No, but we were no different than anybody else.
Right. That was just common country life in the 1930s. It was the way everybody in the country lived.
That makes sense. And I saw a photograph you sent us back of a time when you made a car out of some wood and some old wheels. Could you tell us about that story?
Well, as a boy, you made your own toys. And so I wanted a car, so I had wheels from an old wagon and some old scraps and bits, and so I made my car.
Mm-hmm.
I love it.
You have your sister Lindy had to push you around in it. Aunt Lindy had to push you.
Whoever I could bribe to push me.
I hear ya. Wow. So after growing up, you were in the military. Would you like to share any thoughts on those years with us?
Well, I had just missed World War II. I had 3 older brothers who were in World War II, but my turn was during the Korean War, and I went to Michigan State, ROTC, and when I graduated and was commissioned, I had orders to report to California to go to Korea. Well, I had the summer off, but then Eisenhower drew the line at the 38th parallel, and I never got there. So I had to wait a little longer, and then I wound up fighting the Cold War. And I served at that time with the Air Force in northern Maine, standing alert for anything coming over the North Pole. And
you also made
the winters were kind of rough because it was kind of rough keeping those airplanes going at 180 inches of snow and 40 below zero.
Wow.
He was an excellent mechanic. He had learned, he had worked in the garage in Caledonia. You used to work in the garage during World War II. You were like 14, weren't you?
Yeah, I started in early, and all the able-bodied men were gone to World War II, so there was all kinds of work available.
Well, thank you for sharing more about that, and thank you for your service. And we'd love to hear more about your wife. Over 60 years of marriage, right?
Yeah.
Just right at 60. My mother passed away just as they were about to celebrate 60 years together.
Okay.
They originally met when they were 4, My dad's older sister, Lindy, used to babysit for my mother, her brother, and her sister. And she used to bring my dad along to play. So they literally knew each other for 82 years.
Wow.
And they were married for 60 of those years.
Beautiful.
Well, we had a common relative. My cousin was my wife's aunt through marriage.
Right.
Sure.
One of my father's relatives, a
cousin.
She was a cousin, married one of my maternal grandmother's brothers. And she suggested my Aunt Lindy as a babysitter for my grandmother's children. So that was kind of how things came together.
Wow. Well, that is beautiful. And we would love to hear also more about some of your farming experience. I hear you love to dig and farm. Would you tell us more about that?
Well, that sort of comes natural as such. Farming was, at that time, was very intensive with labor. Very few farmers had tractors. It was most of us was done with horses and hand labor. And you had to do a lot of work before you went to school in the morning, and you did a lot of work out in the fields after you got home, and a lot of times that you had to stay home from school in the spring and in the fall to help plant or harvest the crops as necessary. And a lot of the big, particularly harvest time, was almost a big event. All farmers came together and go from one farm to the other because it required a lot of labor to harvest and thresh the grain. And so it would all come to one farm, the farmers in the neighborhood, and then the equipment and all the farmers and their horses and wagons would go to the next farm to thresh the grain, or to fill the silo, or to bring in the corn.
I love that way of working together, and that is awesome. And from what I understand, you still are out mowing the lawn, farming, and working out there, right?
Yeah, I guess one thing about those times we always enjoyed was the women got together too to prepare the meals, and when we find out who the good cooks were in the neighborhood.
Man, I can just taste the delicious food right now as you talk about it.
Thank you.
Wow.
There were many good cooks out there.
Yeah, I hear you. Well, Gene, we celebrate and recognize you. Thank you for your service. Thank you for who you are and for your legacy and your family. And Mary, thanks for all you've done to connect us and talk today and learning more about your family. Is there anything else either of you would like to say as we wrap up?
Thank you very much for honoring my dad. He's a very special guy, obviously, not just to me, but we really need to appreciate our older people. They're the keepers of our history, our stories. We really need to honor them and celebrate them more, in my opinion. And thank you very much for doing that today.
Well, I feel like an old truck. The odometer rolls over 90, but it just becomes a number, and you don't pay attention to that. You wonder what kind of condition it is. Will the darn thing start this morning?
His goal is to live to be 100. They try to make that happen.
I love it. It's inspiring. You're wonderful. You're beautiful. Thank you both for spending time with us. And yes, I love what you said about honoring our elders and their legacy and their stories. So thank you for spending some time with us. And we'll see you around. We'll see you at 100 and before.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you, Kevin. Have a great day.
Thank you very much.